This morning, I'd like to talk about a tractate of the Talmud. Don't fall asleep just yet. I promise you I tried to make this interesting. A tractate of the Talmud called Moed Katan. So if you paid attention at the end of the Seder, you know from Echad Miyodea that there are 6 orders of the Mishnah. The Mishnah is our major work of the oral tradition. The second of those 6 orders is called Moed, or festivals, which is its subject matter. Moed is subdivided into 12 masechtas, or tractates, and the 11th of the 12 masechtot is called Moed Katan. This is show and tell. This is the Babylonian Talmud. The last 3 tractates are all in here. Since Moed Katan is one of the 3 in this tractate, and you can see that it's actually rather short. Moed Katan is only 3 chapters. The first 2 chapters deal with the laws of Chol HaMoed. And the 3rd chapter, very strangely, primarily deals with the laws of mourning. So why would the sages, of all the 63 tractates of the Talmud, juxtapose the laws of mourning, include the laws of mourning in the section of the Talmud that deals with Chol HaMoed? Not only do the 2 themes not seem to fit together, they actually are in many ways the opposite. Chol HaMoed is joyful. Mourning is sad. Chol HaMoed is holidays. Mourning is Shiva and Shloshim. The mourning laws are among the most observed laws of Judaism. I get asked a ton of questions about the laws of mourning. But the laws of Chol HaMoed are among the least observed in Judaism. I don't think I've ever gotten a question about the proper way to observe Chol HaMoed. The 2 don't seem to go together very well at all. So why discuss them in the same tractate? To answer the question, let's first understand what Chol HaMoed is. So Passover, just like Sukkot, is basically a week-long celebration that begins and ends with Yamim Tovim. One day in Israel, they've already finished their Pesach. 2 days of Yontif at the beginning and at the end in the diaspora. A Yom Tov, as you know, is a full holiday. It carries with it many restrictions and rituals. We light candles, we wear special clothing, we abstain from work. But wedged in between these holidays are days that aren't exactly a festival, but by no means just any other Tuesday. We call these in-between days Chol HaMoed. Chol means ordinary, regular, and Moed means festival, holiday. So it's an ordinary holiday, or maybe better yet, a half holiday. Days that are part ordinary and part elevated. So what do we do on Chol HaMoed? Well, actually, the answer is not so straightforward. On Chol HaMoed, we keep many of the restrictions that we keep on the regular Yom Tovs, but we also suspend many others. Where we draw the line is not perfect. It actually varies across communities and across different interpretations. We're taught, for instance, that we shouldn't work on Chol HaMoed. But if you really have to work, it's okay. Some Jewish day schools are open for classes on Chol HaMoed. Some are closed. We should go out and have fun and go on excursions. It's a very popular thing to do on Chol HaMoed with family and friends. But if we're going out, we should dress a little bit nicer than we would dress on an ordinary day, just to show respect to the holiday. Chol HaMoed is really a study in the tensions of intermediacy. They are days whose identities are both literally and figuratively in between, caught in between. All this makes Chol HaMoed even more of a strange phenomenon. Holidays and ordinary days, we can understand that. All religions have holidays and ordinary days. But these days of half holidays seem trapped in their own paradox. But I must say that sometimes being trapped in that tension feels rather familiar, actually rather comfortable, more than ordinary days and holidays. Because I would offer that Chol HaMoed is meant to replicate the state of everyday life, maybe just with a little more intention. Life that is neat and messy at the same time. Life that has many priorities, but priorities that are constantly competing one with the other. Our homes and our workplaces, which you might call ordinary places, are sometimes locations for the holy, places where we experience wonder and amazement. Ordinary moments can often surprise us with the extraordinary. And how many moments that were supposed to be extraordinary ended up often disappointing us, passing us by with barely any notice. The vast majority of our days, I think, could not be easily divided into ordinary and extraordinary, Chol or Moed. There's somewhere in between. At the conclusion of services tonight, when the stars come out and the holiday has ended, we will bless God by calling God Hamavdil ben Kodesh Lechol. God, you are the one who distinguishes between the holy and the profane. God can make some of those distinctions, but for us, most of the time, we are living in the chaos of the in-between. And because that in-between is chaotic, it makes sense that Chol HaMoed has such indefinite rules. In indefinite places, we are given the space to figure things out for ourselves, to navigate through the chaos, come up with what works for us, find the place where we feel comfortable. And I think that understanding of Chol HaMoed helps us to understand why the laws of mourning are juxtaposed to them in Tractate Moed Katan. When it comes to the feeling of being caught in between, living in tension, at no time is that more true than when you have recently lost a loved one and are grieving that loss. I remember my own losses and the feelings I had afterwards, after I encountered the world for the first time, encountered other people in those first few weeks. I saw life going on as normal for everyone and everything around me. The same traffic, the same politics, the same petty disagreements, the same issues at home and the same issues at work. But deep down, for me, the whole world had been shattered. I was still searching for my identity. How could everything be so much the same when I feel like I'm in such a different place? And I remember speaking to others for the first time, pretending like everything was ordinary, when deep down nothing was ordinary at all. That feeling that I had, and that feeling that so many of you have shared with me, the uneasiness of going about daily life, the homelessness, that is in-betweenness. That's Chol HaMoed. And actually, our customs of mourning are aware of this tension and address them head on. If you've been at a Shiva before, you know that we say very commonly at a Shiva to the mourners, Hamakom yenachem etchem b'toch shar avelei Tzion v'Yerushalayim. May God comfort you among the mourners of Zion and Jerusalem. When we say this phrase, the idea is slowly to bring the mourner out of that place of isolation and into the comfort, the community of language. God in that passage is Hamakom yenachem etchem. A place will give you comfort. We remind mourners that even in the instability, even with the homelessness, there is still a place, an eternal place. There is still an identity, an eternal identity to which you belong. That is God, that is the Jewish people. I know it feels like you are no longer you without your loved one, but you are part of something bigger, something eternal, something that will never be lost. Shavuot, which is coming up in a few weeks, it's a wonderful holiday, but those 2 days, one day in Israel, they feel like a momentary disruption in our lives. We go full throttle into the holiday and leave full throttle coming out of it. It's a holiday of pure elevation, and if you blink, you missed it. But these days of Chol HaMoed, they are a gift. They teach us that Passover may be just a week long, but the message of the holiday must be integrated into our ordinary lives, into our daily lives, to remember that Jews must always be on the side of justice. These are the lessons of Passover. That Jews must always stand up for the oppressed, the marginalized, the powerless. That's not just a week-long thing. It must be integrated into our daily lives. That's what Chol HaMoed models for us, pulling us out of the ordinary and reminding us that we are called to much higher aspirations. And if you talk to bereavement counselors, they will say the same thing about integration when you ask them about healthy ways of reacting to a loss. Shiva is 7 days, but in many ways they are the easiest days. We construct a whole world around the mourner so that they don't have to think and they don't have to encounter the ordinary world. But after the Shiva is over, the challenge is integration. How do I carry this terrible loss inside of me, but at the same time live my life, go about my business, sustain my relationships? Shiva is not the challenge. The ordinary days, those are the challenge. And like Chol HaMoed, those are days that are chaotic and unsettling. They are full of progress and full of regression. No wonder the two topics are juxtaposed, one right next to the other. Days of in-betweenness. So what is the lesson of this tractate? What Jewish wisdom is there to help us navigate life lived in the in-between? I'll share with you what to me is the most powerful and important lesson. It's conveyed in a story of Rav Huna, a famous Babylonian rabbi, the leader of his community. It's found right here on folio 27. This is the story. A certain woman lived in the neighborhood of Rav Huna, and she had 7 sons. One of them died, and she wept for him excessively. Rav Huna sent a message to her, "Do not do this." But she took no heed of him. He then sent another message to her, "Do not do this. If you listen to me, it is well, but if not, prepare shrouds for another death." And one by one, the Talmud says, all her other sons died. In the end, Rav Huna said to her, "Now prepare shrouds for yourself." And soon thereafter, she died too. I know that at first glance this seems like a terrible, terrible story. Why shouldn't a woman who has lost her child mourn indefinitely? And moreover, why should she be punished in the most heinous way by losing her other children for her grief, which is very understandable? This is a story that's almost too awful to contemplate. Is Rav Huna that cruel? Is God that cruel? The answer, I believe, is not to read the story literally. Often in rabbinic stories, death is used as a narrative device. The woman who cannot escape her own grief does not literally kill her other children or kill herself, but by being so consumed with her grief for the child who passed away, she effectively abandons her other children. The relationship is what dies, and ultimately, she can't be herself. Indefinite mourning can become its own kind of death, and that is the real lesson of that story. It can be very tempting to lose ourselves to grief, to abandon life in the in-between. Tensions are uncomfortable. It's much easier to go into a life full throttle of sorrow and aloneness. It has been a very difficult time in the world, and sadly, many seem to be pulled strongly in that direction. But we are warned in this tractate never to go down that road. No matter what life throws at you, we are still here. We are still living. The chaos of the in-between is exactly where we need to be. That is why our prayer of mourning, the mourner's Kaddish, is not a prayer for the dead. It's a prayer for life in the face of death. Rabbi Soloveitchik once wrote, "Kaddish is the declaration that no matter how powerful death is, notwithstanding the ugly end of man, however terrifying the grave is, however nonsensical and absurd everything appears, no matter how black one's despair is, and how nauseating an affair life is, we declare and profess publicly and solemnly that we are not giving up, that we are not surrendering." We say the Kaddish, as we will do in just a few moments. And now you know why. We are championing life in the in-between. And so, Yitgadal v'yitkadash Shemei Rabbah, staring at the Chol HaMoed, the in-betweenness that is life, we reach beyond and attempt to grasp unto God's eternal name. Be'alma divra chirutei, in this world that God created, we will not turn towards the darkness of silence, loneliness, and endless grief. Ve'yamlich malchutei b'chayechon uve'yomechon. We pray for the ability to integrate the holy and the ordinary in our lifetimes, in our relationships. Uvechaye dechol Beit Yisrael. And we remember that we are defined not only by our losses, but by the eternal people to which we belong, and the eternal covenant to which we are a part. Oseh shalom bimromav, hu ya'aseh shalom aleinu v'al kol Yisrael. While we know that the peace that we seek only abides in the heavens, we pray that we may merit just a small taste, a small glimpse at the holiness that we so desperately yearn for in this ordinary world, in these ordinary days. V'yimru, Amen. I ask everyone now to turn to the Yizkor booklets, which should have been distributed at your seats, and we're going to begin the service on page 5. You can remain seated until personal Yizkor prayers are recited, and I'll instruct you when. Eternal God, in whose eyes 1,000 years are but as yesterday, in whose hands are the souls of the living and the dead, in your sight every soul is precious. O Lord, from whom we come, to whom we belong, and to whom we shall return, strengthen us as we now remember our loved ones who have been reunited with you. Be with us as we consecrate this hour to the memory of our departed.